Hey guys, welcome in this new video. Today in this video, we'll be continuing our beginner-friendly React project series. So, this is the next part of the beginner-friendly React series. If you're not following the series, I will highly encourage you to follow the series because I am considering the beginner-friendly topic in a simple way. So right now, our project is like this. So, Github User Search. So, this is a simple project which make the use of API, async await, and a little bit of React states and functions, components. So this is also a beginner friendly project, so you can follow along. So what it does, it has a search box and a search button. Okay, so we will type a username of the GitHub user that you want to search, and then you press search. So once I press the search, as you can see, it will fetch all the users. It will fetch 30 of the results of all the users that has Pranay in their username. Okay, so it's pretty cool and simple project, and it also has a profile picture, a name, and a repo link. So this GitHub sign, GitHub icon that you are seeing here, that I'm hovering over, is nothing but a link to the repo. Okay, so you can click here and get to the repo. So let's dive into how to create this project. So first thing first, I will open up my VS Code. As you can see, I have already created the React app, but as usual, it doesn't contain anything. It just is empty React app. I had cleaned up my files and folders, as you can see here. As you can Google it out how to clean this up, and the app does not contain anything other than a div with the class name app, which we'll be using in order to write JSX inside this div. Okay, the app CSS is basically the universal styling for our application, and it doesn't contain anything at all. It's empty. And app.js, okay, we have gone through this. Okay, index.js is basically the default code provided by the React, so it doesn't has anything particular. And form.js is basically the component we'll be using, so don't worry about that, as this is also empty. I just have created the file. So we'll start by writing the code in app.js. Okay, so we'll write the code in app.js. So we'll start by writing some code like div class container. Okay, container, and this will contain a form component. Okay, so we have created the file, so let me create the component, and I need to show you something. So take a look at this diagram. Okay, so I have took the screenshot of the actual web application. So here we have this form. Okay, so form component consists of a, if you can I will just get, form component will consist of a input, search, and a search button. Okay, so this is the form component, and the box, this is not basically the component. We can create it, but I try to avoid it to over engineering things, so I skipped it. So box is basically the individual div, okay, which will contain the user pic, the name, and the actual file, actual repo link. Okay, so let me try to create the form component. So let's see, we'll go to the, we'll say form, FORM form. We'll import that once we write the code inside the form, but for now, just say it will have a props. So we'll pass some props to the form component. So what are those? Let's say handle input change. So this is going to be a function. Okay, so this function is basically for the input that we have on the web application, the search box. Okay, and another is handle submit, or say form submit, to make, okay, handle form submit. So handle form submit is basically for our submit button. So once we click on the submit button, the on submit event should be clicked. So we will attach that event on the form. So if it doesn't make sense to you as of now, just bear with me. Along the way, I will be explaining it in the more detail and we'll be looking at in a more clearer way. So, okay, bear with me. And the next is input. So you want to pass the input. Okay, let's see. What is it? So this input will going to be a state. So how do we do that? So firstly, now that we know this, so we will create a form component. Okay. So let me write something like import react from react, and let's say const form. So I will create a component which is nothing but the arrow function. Okay, and let's say export default form. Okay, now we are sending the props from the app.js. So we need to receive these props here. So we'll destructure the props. Let's say handle input change, handle form submit, and input. Okay, so it should also return, so it will return a JSX. So JSX will contain this. So right now the HTML code for as you can see, the HTML code for this is not written anywhere. Okay, so the form component, inside the form component, it will contain the HTML or the JSX code for this. Okay, so let me write it down. So let's say form. Okay, so I need to make sure I write it in form of HTML form, and yeah, inside the form it will contain an input. Yeah, because we have the input type text here, right? So let's say okay, type text, and it will also contain a placeholder. So placeholder, it's nothing but the text that we have here. The text holder is nothing but the text like enter username to search, so that our user can be aware of the fact that you can only enter the username here. Obviously you can have a validation to force user or to make user enter only username, but it is the best UX practice to have a placeholder for your input. Okay, especially when the inputs are the text field. On change. So why on change? Because whenever we type something on the input, the on change function will be triggered. Okay, so once the user to start typing on the keyboard inside the input field, input text field, the on change function will be triggered, and based on that on change function, we'll be grabbing the exact username that the user has entered. Okay, and on basis of that username, we'll be making calls to an GitHub API in order to fetch users and to display on the screen. So let's say on change. Now on change, we know that we have a function from app.js. So we will just call this function. We will pass the reference to this function. Actually, we will be calling this function on change from app.js. So this is nothing but the reference to the function handle input change. Okay, and value. So value is another kind of a property that we have on an input tag. If you have learned the HTML, you probably know this, because once you set the value of input tag, that is basically what is shown inside the text field. Okay, so when we say input, so input is basically the state that is coming from app.js. So right now we are assigning the value attribute to input, so that the value can be depending on the state. So it is state dependent. So the value attribute here on the input would be a state dependent. Okay, so let's say input, right. Again we have a button after the input text, so we will say button type should be submit, because we are handling the on submit event, so it should be submit. Okay, and let's say search and handle form submit. So this event should occur whenever the user clicks on submit button, in this case the search button. Okay, so we will say on submit, we will pass the reference to the handle form submit function from the app.js. Okay, so I think that's it for the form.js. We will save it. Okay, and we'll go to the app.js. We have this. So we know that we don't have these functions handle form submit and handle input change. So we will create these functions. Okay, right here, right on the app.js. So inside the app.js, so firstly I will just define something. So this const URL, so the URL to make the API request, API calls. So http://api.github.com. Okay, we get the URL. Let's say we will make a handle form submit. Okay, so here I will say const handle form submit. This will contain a E, which is nothing but an event object. You might have also learned it inside the JavaScript. Okay, so nothing too fancy. And we know that whenever we submit on the form, it is a default behavior of a browser to refresh the page, to refresh our web application. So we don't want this to happen. So what we will do is we will say event.prevent default. So we will prevent the default behavior of a browser to refresh our web application. Okay, so with that being said, what we can do is we will also define a function called handle input change. This will also contain a event object, because we know on changing the input, on typing something on the input, it will receive it here. Okay, so we will say, so for storing the input, I think we should create a state. So let's just create a state. Okay, let's say input and set input use state. Okay, and use state will be empty for now. Okay, right. So let's say on whenever user types something, the handle input change will be triggered, and once it triggered, we will set input state to the e.target.value. So basically e.target.value is nothing but the JavaScript or the React way of extracting the value from the input. So you might have learned it in the JavaScript, so I will be not going deeper into this. Okay, save it, and okay, save it. I will just open the terminal and I will close this, and I will start with the fresh. So let's say npm start in order to start the React application. Let's wait for a few seconds till our application loads. We have got an error, so let me go to the browser first. So it is saying that the form is not defined. Okay, got it. So as you can see, we have created the component form.js, but we also exported that way, but we forgot to import inside the app.js. So let me import form component and save it, and let's see if we have any error. No. So let's go to this, and now it is showing. It is showing it's in the plain form because we have not styled it yet. Okay, we'll be styling it after we completed the functionality. Okay, so let's see. Also I will show you something like console.log input. Now that we set the state, I will be showing that how it's working. Okay, so let me go to the browser. I will type something. So let me inspect element in order to see the console logs. Go to console. Okay, I think we should need to refresh that. Yeah, no error. So I will type something like Pranay, and as you can see, as I'm typing this out, the entire characters that I have typed is showing right here. Okay, so that's how the on input change is working. Okay, now that we know that on input change is working, we will move on to write some more code. Okay, so I will just delete this. So now that we know, we can grab the username inside the input state. Okay, so in the similar way, now that we have a username, we can make an API call and fetch the user's data from this GitHub URL. Okay, so what I can do is I can just create a function to fetch this up. Okay, so I will create another function to fetch the data from the API. So let's say fetch data. This will be an async function, and it will take a parameter as an input, which is nothing but an username. Okay, so now that we created it, let me see, is there anything wrong? No, nothing is wrong here. So let's say try. Okay, what is saying? Expected this, I don't know. So we will say try. The fetch data function to fetch the data via an API call. Okay, so let me create it here on the top. Fetch data, and it will obviously have a argument which is nothing but an username input state. Okay, I will say try and catch. So this is basically, you should always have a basic error handling, because when you are working with an API, because whenever the API crashes or your code has some bug which act as an obstacle in a way of fetching the data from the API, your application should work steadily. Your application should not stop because of that simple bug or simple error. So in order to make sure that it doesn't happen and your entire application is safe from error handling, you should be using try catch or any other form of error handling. So it will try catch is very simple. So it will try the code inside the try block. So if it catches some error, it will just throw, and the error catch can be found inside the catch block. Okay, so let's say when we catch the error, we will throw the error. Okay, so throw error, and inside the try we will say const result. We'll be using async await. So let's say await. So in order to use await, we need to make sure that our function is async. Okay, only we can use await with async function. So what is await, async and await? Async and await is basically the same way. If you have seen my previous React beginner friendly project, in which I have created a code generator, I guess. So inside that I have used fetch API. Okay, so the fetch API we need to use .then. So we'll be chaining that. Okay, so in order to simplify that, and you can say it's a modern syntax to write the asynchronous code. So await, because we are waiting for our fetch the users from an API, so it will take some time. So we are using the await keyword so that our application can wait. Okay, so this is the form of asynchronous programming. If you not heard about it, I highly recommend you to Google it and read about it, because that's the very important part of JavaScript and React. Okay, so inside the fetch we will pass the URL. Okay, so I will use template literals here. So it is the template literal string in which I can use a string as well as I can use a JavaScript. Okay, so we do have a URL, right? So I need to make sure that this is outside of the app. Okay, so let's say URL. So this will be same for all the requests to an API. What will change? The search will be same as well, like search / users / okay, not slash, question mark q. So this is the query parameter. So what we will be querying for? We will be querying for the username. Okay, so user is nothing but the input state. Okay, so we will say equal input state that will be receiving here. Okay, let's see input. So now that we fetched the data, we need to convert that into a JSON. So let's say const data JSON await result dot JSON, and I will show you what kind of data we are fetching. So I will say console.log data JSON. Okay, we are not calling this function as of now, but I think when we clicked on the submit button, we can call this function. Okay, so let's see. When we clicked on submit, let's say we will call fetch data, and we will pass input here. Okay, semicolon, save it and go to the browser. Okay, now we'll just open up the console right here. I'll clear this console, refresh the page and say Pranay and search. Now as you can see, we have got the data from the API. So as you can see, inside the atoms we have an array of object. So it will return the first 30 matches with the our provided user input. So it has extracted the username that has Pranay inside it, that includes the Pranay in their login username. Okay, so that's what we want, but we need to get to this atoms array. Okay, so we are not getting the data in the literal manner. Okay, we have this data inside the atoms. Let me go to the code. Okay, so now we need to return something, because we don't want to console log the data. We want to return the data from this function. Okay, so we will say return so data.json dot items, because we have seen this, all our data is there inside the items. Okay, so now that we have this, let's say, so here we are calling this, so we will store the data inside some variable. So let's say data obvious name. Okay, so we will say await, and we need to make sure that this function is also async, because we are using the await keyword. Okay, now that we have the data with us, we will set the data. So as you have already seen it inside the browser, this is in the form of array. Okay, the atoms is in the form of array. So in order to store this, I will create a user state which will contain the array of this 30 data from 0 to 29 index. So yeah, we can do that. Let's say we'll create a state here, const, let's say users and set users use state. This will be a empty array, the default value. Okay. So now that we get the data, we will set the users with the received data. Okay. Right. We almost done. We get the data and I can okay, let me just show you what does the user state stores. Okay, so console log and go to our application. We will say Rajesh this time, search, and if you we need to reload it, and we will say Rajesh, clicked on search. So we are getting the empty data. So let me see what's the problem. Set users data. Okay, fetch the data. As you can see, we are getting the data, but it is taking the time as we are requesting from the API. It will take some time. So as you can see inside the console log, we are getting the information regarding the Rajesh username. So our code is fine. There is nothing wrong. Okay, we will just remove this. And now that we are getting the data, we need to make sure to display the data on the screen. So as you can see in the diagram, here we have achieved pretty much so for now we have achieved this. So this is working. And now we need to create this, the display or the showcase section where our users data is visible. So we'll create that. Let me go ahead and code this. So just above the form, we need to make sure to display the user data. So before that, we need to use a condition like if the users array contains the data, then and only then we need to map the single user out from the users array. It also has an index as a parameter, second parameter. So it will return some data. So we will display it in the form of HTML. So let me write it like class name box. Let's say div class name box. So which will also contain div with the class name wrapper. Inside the wrapper we have div with the class name image box. So we'll have an image tag inside the image box. The source of the image would be taken out from the state. As of now, I'm not writing anything out, but I will show you what to write here. So username and class name should be avatar dot or slash img, and alternate name alt should be avatar hyphen img. That's the image name. And after the image div, we have h1, let's say username, and we also have an link. So as you can see here, we also have this icon, so which will point out to the repo link. So we'll be creating that as well. So this is what exactly I'm doing right now. So a tag hyperreference should be okay. Inside a tag we have an icon with the class name FA. By the way, these classes are just the font awesome class names, nothing special about that. Okay, so we will fill this up. Okay, we will fill the details, right? The source of the image, the name of the person, okay, name of the user, the hyperreference URL to the repo. Okay, so how that we get this is just we'll go to any of the object here. Okay, so as we can expand this, as you can see, the first one is the key name is avatar URL, which will contain the URL for the user image. So we can use that. We can also have a repos URL. We can use that to fetch the repos. And we also have a login as a key, which will contain a value as a username. So now that we know this, we can just fill it up. Okay, so it will be user dot avatar underscore URL, and this will going to be user dot login, and this will be user dot repos underscore URL. So I will save it and I will go to my application, and as you can see, we get the user image, the name and the URL. Because of the poor styling or no styling, we are not going to see it in a much better way. Okay, but to test the functionality, I will type some another name, let's say Amol, and search it. So we are getting the, okay, this one is pretty damn okay. Okay, now that we do that, let's move on to the CSS part. So app.css. So first thing first, let me grab the font family. So let's say font family Poppins from the Google font. So if you don't know this, just select the font, select whatever kind of the font weights that you need, like medium, semi-bold or whatever. Just go to import, copy this link, import link, okay, by Google Form. Now we'll go to the style and paste it. So now let me reset the web page by writing the resetting code. Before, after, let's say margin 0, padding 0, and box sizing border box. Okay, body font family sans serif, and the font we have just exported. So why we are writing sans serif? Because this is a fallback font. So if by some reason for the URL from this is not working and we no longer have Poppins available to us, our web page will fetch the default font, that is sans serif. Okay, so we'll also have some background color to the body. Let's say background color F59 AA3, kind of a pink color. Then container, okay, container which will contain a width 100%, display flex direction, column, justify content center, align item center to center the vertically and horizontally. Okay, margin 2 rem from top bottom, and left right is auto. Let's see what it has done. Yeah, pretty good. Go to the form. Okay, select the form, position sticky, because we want the top of the button and the input text to be sticky. So now, as you can see, as I'm scrolling, the search box is just sliding up. Okay, so I don't want it to happen. I want it to stick to the top, regardless of where I scroll. Okay, so I will say sticky top 20 pixel, so it should be 20 pixels from top. And by the way, I also made a video on positioning of an CSS element, which will contain sticky position, static position, relative, absolute, everything about the positioning. So if you haven't watched the video, I will highly recommend watching that if you have any doubt in there. Okay, so Z index is going to be 999, because I want this to be on the top of every other element. Okay, form input, so input inside the form, let's say initial border should be none, outline should be none, font size should be 1 rem. Okay, padding should be 0.4 from top bottom and 1 rem from left right. Border radius should be 0.1 rem. Okay, let me go here and select the box element, which will contain a background color F5 E4 C3, width of 400 pixel, margin 1 rem, display flex, justify content space between. So I can just move it here. So as you can see, the position of this input and the search button is now sticky. Okay, and let's say align item center, padding 1 rem, 2 rem, border radius 0.5 rem. Okay, let's say button with the type submit, which is nothing but the search button. Okay, same border none, outline. Okay, outline none, background color, let's say 3, 4, A, 7, B, 2, padding 0.5 rem, 0.7 rem, color is white, font weight, how much thicker the font we want to be, 600, cursor pointer. Okay, border radius 0.1 rem, and margin left in order to create the space 1 rem. Okay, now that we have space between the input text field and the search button. Okay, so let's trigger the box wrapper, display flex, gap 1 rem, align items center, and inside the box wrapper we will say h1, font size 1 rem. Now that we can target the image box, position relative, width 45 pixels, border radius 50%, overflow hidden, border 3 pixels solid, let's say 5B2E35. Okay, now as you can see, it is taking up the it is pretty much looking like the end product, but we have last styling of the image right here. Let's say position absolute, top 0, left 0, width 100%, height is also 100% of the parent, which is nothing but the image box, and object fit cover in order to take up the entire space. Save it. Okay, so if I say, now I think we have created our application entirely. Let me try another name like Shreya and search it. So as you can see, it has fetched the user image, the username, and the GitHub repo link. So that's it for today's video. I hope you learned something new, and I think we have another 1 or 2 projects remaining in the beginner friendly React project. So I hope you are eagerly waiting for the next projects. I'll be trying to make it as soon as possible. Until then, if you have any doubt, comment down below. And for more such video, keep following. Thank you.